This is Dan Bolen, and I'm host of our podcast today, The Courage to Be Courageous, a place where people can come from all walks of life who have had fear in their lives, maybe even had some secrets in their life, and they can use courage to overcome them. I'd like to thank all of you in my audience that have been listening to my podcast and the wonderful comments you've made. I really appreciate that. For all of you that can make a comment on any particular podcast, just go to my website, www.danbolen.com, and there's a place then that you can leave a message and just message what you liked about it, what you would like to see on my podcast in the near future. I want to also let individuals know that I will be doing a book signing at the Diversionary Theater in San Diego, and that is on October 7th at 8:30 p.m., and it'll last about an hour and a half. I will tell a little bit about my book, The Courage to Be Courageous, how it was developed, and a little bit about my podcast, and so some snippets of some of the podcasts that we've done. So my partner, John, is going to try to do it on Facebook Live. So if you can join us on Facebook Live, it would be greatly appreciated. Again, that's October 7th at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. And I'll look forward to, hopefully you can see it on Facebook Live. For those of you in the San Diego area, we'd love to have you come down. All the proceeds of my book go to 100% to the Diversionary Theater. So I'm doing that as a gift to them, and they're giving me the gift of being able to do a book signing there. So all of you can come. We appreciate it. For those of you who can't, hopefully you can check it out on Facebook Live. Well, we have a wonderful guest today, and I want to introduce him. This is Andy Vaughn, and he is a friend that John and I have known for several years. He is a president of Alliant University, and we're going to talk about how he got in that position. I do want to make a comment, though. We're going to talk a little bit about Andy's personal life, but Alliant University is the leading university in the United States for training clinical psychologists. And what a wonderful experience they're doing. And I believe they just opened a nursing division, which Andy will talk to us a little about as well. Well, Andy, welcome to my podcast. It's good to have you. And tell us a little bit about your history, and then we'll talk about your position as the president of the university.
Dan, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Appreciate it. Love the podcast. And thanks for inviting me to speak with you today. Really appreciate that, and everything that you do as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think my background started in radio. I did top 40 radio as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, then moved over to the news talk side as a young 20-something. Worked for several stations in the Midwest and then in Pennsylvania and back to California, mostly on the news talk side, but mostly around sports radio. Nebraska football was big back when they were a great dominant team. Got to cover the games for the radio stations and ended up doing mostly political talk, although my stance was very neutral, independent, a lot of politics, a lot of local news, but that was my first background. When I moved to California, I wanted to be a K-12 teacher, so I went to get my master's degree in San Diego. About a month into my program, someone that worked at the university said, "Hey, you'd be really good at working in marketing and higher education and admissions." And I said, "No, I'm good. I just want to be a teacher." And they said, "Well, your tuition would be free if you worked here." And I said, "Now I'm interested." The true story. The only reason I got into higher education was truly because they offered me free tuition to go to school. That was it. I mean,
freebie's always good. A freebie's good.
I mean, when people say, "Did you always want to be a president, CEO in higher ed? And did you set your goal?" I said, no, I actually completely fell into it. I tripped over into it basically they said free tuition. I said, yes. So that was almost 30 years ago, and I just never left. So I fell in love with higher ed by accident and really got to understand the passion behind helping people go from A to B. I love helping people that are stuck and coming up with a solution that is not necessarily expensive, but yet life-changing. And so what I really fell in love with about higher ed is people would come to me, they were either underemployed, unemployed, or miserable in their career. And I had a chance to help them connect the dots. And I can't tell you the thousands of people over the years and hundreds that actually spoke about that connection. It was just so fulfilling. So anyway, that was 30 years ago. I've been a president and CEO at 2 different universities in the last 12 years. I work for Alliant International University. We're headquartered here in San Diego. We have 6 campuses in California. We have a medical school in downtown Mexico City called St. Luke at Alliant University. And then in Phoenix, as you mentioned, we just opened a brand new campus of Alliant University's School of Nursing and Health Sciences. We're branching off into nursing, licensure programs, and health sciences. We really are laser focused on graduate level programs, most of which lead to licensure. We do not have undergraduate programs. We don't have sports teams. We used to. One famous saying on our sports team, a history, we still own the NCAA record with our basketball team as the worst defeat in NCAA history. That's right. You can look it up. We still have that record today. So we dropped sports. No joke. We actually dropped our sports program shortly after that defeat to Oklahoma, where we lost by about 100 points. It was a shameful day. We decided let's get rid of the sports programs and focus only on academics. And then we dropped our undergraduate programs later, but we just really are laser focused on licensure programs, professional practice, graduate level programs. And that's who we are.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Andy's personal life, when he came out as gay, what that was like for him, how that was with how it affected his family. Tell us a little bit about when you knew you were gay or different, and what effect did that have on your family?
Well, I think the earliest memory I have of being gay, and although, as a kid, you don't know exactly what it means, you just have certain feelings. And I was probably 7 years old, maybe 6 or 7, and I had 2 babysitters. Now, I grew up in a small town in Nebraska back in the 1970s and 1980s. Different time, different place. The world has changed dramatically since then, as we all know, especially in the bigger cities. But Nebraska, small town in the 70s, 80s, very conservative. I had 2 babysitters. One was a high school kid named Matt, and one was a high school girl named Nina. And I remember when my mom would tell me that Matt was coming over to babysit me as a 6 or 7-year-old, I would get a little excited about that. And I didn't know it at the time, but I kind of had a crush on him. And Nina was great. I loved her too, but I just remember having a different feeling towards Matt. And, I think looking back in grade school, I had crushes on guys without even realizing what that meant. You just had a different feeling. You couldn't really define it.
Of course.
And then later in junior high and high school, I think I had the same, but as youngsters, especially today, sexuality, if you look at the Kinsey scale, it can be a scale of 1 to 6, and it is fluid. And I think the younger you are, the more fluid it can be. It depends on where you are in your life. And I kind of thought, well, maybe I'm bisexual. It'll be a passing fad. I don't know. And I think back in those times, as you know, Dan, there was the expectation that you graduated high school, you went into the service, or you went to college, and then you married shortly after and had 2 or 3 kids. And that was the expectation in my town. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to live up to that fulfillment that everyone had. And that was a big mistake, by the way, because I think the courage to be courageous means you gotta create your own pathway, what's right for you, not what others expect you to be. And I kind of fell for that, right? For at least a few years. And all the way through college, I didn't have any relationships with men, either in a relationship or sexually at all. I dated girls till I was about 23, 22 years old. And what I learned is, I think so many people look at gay, bi, straight as your sexual preferred. But it's not just about that. That's certainly a big part of it, but it's not the biggest part. I think for me, what I learned about being gay is it's the emotional connection you can have at the highest level that I could not get with another woman. I dated some fantastic individuals, women, and had really great friendships with them. And the sexual part is one thing, but it's another thing to have that highest emotional intertwined connection where you just feel, wow, we are one. And I never had that. It was not until I dated the first guy I met at a gay bar. It only lasted a few months, as early relationships do. But this is going to sound a little cheesy, but I was so afraid to go out to the gay bars in Lincoln, Nebraska and Omaha, Nebraska, because I grew up there. And I was scared to death to go out. So I was 23. I drove 3 hours to go to Des Moines, Iowa, that had a bar called, I think it's still open today, called The Garden. And
well, nobody would know you, right?
No, yeah, no one knew me.
Nobody would know you. They wouldn't.
It was far enough away. I didn't have any friends or relatives there. Yeah. So I was scared to death. This is back in the day when bars had those magazines at the front. So I grabbed a magazine and I sat down at this table and buried my head. I'm so nervous. Like I was actually shaking. I could not. I was also thrilled at the same time, but I was so scared. This guy comes up to me. His name is Kurt, and we're still friends today. Kurt comes up to me and goes, he knew I was new, and he knew I had never, he could kind of tell I was nervous. And he goes, hey, are you new here? And anyway, about a week later, Kurt invited me to come back to Des Moines from Lincoln to spend the weekend with him. And so I did. And this is the cheesy part here. And you're going to laugh, but I'm driving my 1993 red Jeep Wrangler. How Nebraska is that, by the way? Across I-80 from Lincoln to Des Moines, about a 3-hour drive. I stop in this gas station in Iowa, and it's in the middle of a cornfield. It's a September afternoon. The corn is actually blowing in the wind. The sun is glistening off the corn stalks. I'm filling up with gas, and I'm thinking, this is what everyone's been talking about. I had this feeling, that the butterflies in the stomach and this desire to go see Kurt. I'm like, this is what everyone's been talking about all these years. I never understood the infatuation with, oh, I met this girl. I'm so in love. I'm infatuated. And I just always thought, it's kind of overhyped. Now I got it, because again, it's not just the sexual attraction. It's also the emotional attraction at the highest level possible. And I remember thinking, this feels so right. And it was that moment in time when my heart got unlocked a little bit and I was free. And it felt so liberating. I can't even explain to you. Had a great weekend. We dated for a little while longer, but we're still friends today. But that was that moment in time when I thought, aha, this is the moment.
I think it was what you're really saying, the first aha moment when you really began to know who you really were, and that emotional connection with another man.
Right.
And I think it's well repeating what Andy just said to our podcasters here. It's not necessarily the sexual attraction, although that is important. It's the emotional connection. And I totally get that. That's what I have with my partner, John. It's the emotional connection we have. And I think that's just really a powerful statement. And I think that's when you begin to know who you really were and identify who you really were. That's a powerful comment. I thank you for that, Andy. Well, tell me about coming out to your parents and how that was for you.
Yeah, I was 24 when I came out to my mom. My dad had passed away the year prior. At 61, he committed suicide. That was a major life event for me, obviously, and my family and his friends. And yeah, I mean, that's tough to, losing a parent to suicide, losing anyone to suicide is very devastating. So, but it was something in all events. I always look for the good, and the good that came out of my dad's suicide was it taught me that life is really short and you just don't know what your circumstances are going to be later. And so let's live it now. And I thought, you know what, his suicide, his death at 61, and I was 24 or 23, I guess, at the time. I thought, I don't have time to fulfill the dreams of other people and what I should be as maybe a straight guy with 2 or 3 kids, whatever. I need to be me. And I thought it was a catalyst for me at that moment too, to go, I got to start living life the way I need to live it. And so I didn't come out to my mom right away. She was obviously dealing with a major devastation in her life too. So for about a year and a half, I dated, and I finally met a guy. His name was Eric. We were in our young 20s. We were together for about a year, and I was so close to my mom. We were so close, and I talked to her every week, and I couldn't tell her about the best thing in my life, and that was my new partner. So finally one day I told my partner, I said, I got to drive to the town I grew up in and go tell her. I was living in Lincoln. I grew up in a little town called Bellevue, and I thought, I got to make that hour drive to the house I grew up in and tell my mom. And, I always like to say there are two progressive, open-minded people in Nebraska, Warren Buffett and my mom. And there's others too, of course, but I joke.
Democrats.
And I actually knew she'd be okay, but I was scared of that because I had so many friends come out to their families who were disowned, kicked out of the house, told never to come back. Told they were sent to straight camp, the religious camps to try to turn you back to straight. I had many friends that were sent to those camps against their will, but I was just kind of concerned because my friends were going through a whole different experience. I knew my mom would be okay, but still I was scared. So I drive up to the house I grew up in. We sit down at the table. I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner every year for 18 years. And I'm trying to tell her, and I was so scared. Finally, she could sense something. She goes, "Hey, so what's new in the romance life?" This is after about 2 or 3 hours of trying to tell her, and I couldn't. And she said, and I said, "Well, I'm glad you asked." Now I start crying. I am now bawling. I could barely talk. And I said, "Mom, I'm glad you asked. I have been dating someone for about a year. His name is Eric. Mom, I'm gay." And I can't stop crying now because I'm just, it's very emotional. She comes around the table very quickly, holds me and hugs me and says, "This is actually great news. I love this news." And I said, "What do you mean?" And I'm crying and she's crying. She goes, "I have always regretted the moment you would tell me about another woman." She goes, "You're the baby of the family." And she goes, "You're my baby. And I have always dreaded sharing your love with another woman." And she goes, a guy I can totally handle. She goes, "I can share the love with a guy, no problem. Another woman, we would have been in competition, man."
What a great story.
And she meant it too. She meant it. So keep in mind, my mom is now in her probably mid 60s at the time. She's retired. She's in a golfing league in small town Nebraska, and a tennis league and a bowling league, right? So all of her friends are 65 to 85-year-old women, and pretty conservative town. So I come home about a month later, and she has a picture of me and my partner and our dog, and she calls it her grand dog, on the same wall as my sister and her kids, my brother and his kids and their spouses. And she goes, "I just want to let you know that when my friends come over, and some of them are very conservative," she goes, "I want you to know that I proudly announced that my gay son and his partner have adopted this dog, and it's my grand dog." And she said, "If they have a problem with it, they can just get out of my house." And it was just one of those moments where you go, that's my mom right there.
Yes. What a gift she gave you. But that was very courageous of you, Andy, to come out to your mom. Even though you knew she'd accept it, it still takes some courage to get through that fear.
It's hard.
And sometimes we create a lot of fear in our head that doesn't always necessarily come true, but
right. Our
head does the fear thing a lot of times as well. I want to talk about your dad a little bit because I have so much respect for him, even though which had to be so difficult to see your dad take his own life. Tell us about this situation where it was in the 70s and I believe, was he a chief financial officer, I believe, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's his second career. He was a chief financial officer of the Farm Credit Banks of Omaha, which agribusinesses. My dad grew up on a farm in Iowa and then moved to Nebraska in the Air Force. His first career was he served in the U.S. Navy in the Korean War and then the U.S. Air Force in the Vietnam War, and then stayed in the Air Force, I think 20 years, retired at 37, 38. You could go back in the service at 17 at that time. So right. I think he retired at 37, 38, and then got his MBA through the Air Force and became a CFO of a bank. And then his third career after he retired from the bank was actually a college professor. So he was actually in higher ed, and he served as a assistant dean and college professor at a business school in Iowa. So his death came as a big surprise. There were really none of the classic signs of suicide that you might expect, or what you see in the movies, or maybe what you've experienced yourself in your life. And it was a big shock. And I think my dad today would be 91 or 92. And I think especially men in that generation, seeking help was seen as a weakness. Mm-hmm. And that's another life lesson for me that I learned very early as a 20-something is, you know what? Seeking help or guidance is not a weakness. It's a strength. And I think there's so many people that still believe, oh, I can't ask for help, or I can't show that I need mental support. That would be showing me as weak. And it's just quite the opposite.
It is the opposite, right? It shows you're strong.
Absolutely.
The
Yeah.
weak one, the weak one don't necessarily get help, but the strong ones realize they need help. Does that make sense?
That's
Yeah.
right. You know, and so much has changed in the last 30 years, too, on the stigma about mental health and seeking help. It's getting better. It's still not where it needs to be. One of the reasons I love Alliant University and our California School of Professional Psychology is that we specialize in mental health licensure programs, clinical psychology, clinical counseling, marriage family therapy, social work, and licensure programs like that. And it is really, this is the time for mental health licensure programs to really shine, because the stigma is getting less and less each year, which I love. And I wish my dad would have seen that, because, again, military guy, served in 2 different wars. I think the military, at least that's different now, I think. But at that time, it taught them, no, you can be strong. You got to be the rock of the family and always show strength. And I think that was his downfall eventually. It was a big shock. It was the day after Christmas, so that holiday got ruined for many years. Still kind of is today. It's still, our whole family kind of takes a deep breath at the holidays now, because it was the day after Christmas that he did this, and very devastating. Obviously, I think about him every day, and he had a big impact on my life. He was such a great man, just the kind of man you would go, that's my dad. And I got a short story for you. When he was CFO, to kind of tell you about the guy he was, I was at a company party, and there was a group, and this is back in the 1970s, and someone told an off-color joke, a rather racist joke, actually, in a circle of white men. And my dad was in the room, and everyone started laughing at this joke that somebody told, except for my dad. He didn't laugh. He actually got up and he said, "I don't think that's funny. I don't think it's funny at all." And he walked away from the group. So imagine as a kid seeing, and this is the 1970s when that happened, as you know, a lot.
Of course.
Seeing my dad draw a line in the sand and saying, that is not acceptable, and I don't think it's funny, and that's not right. And he said it in front of his group of peers. And I thought, wow, that always stuck with me. And that's the kind of
showed his character, the character who he was.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I love
a great story.
You know, one of the things that after he died, I did is I retraced his steps. I was just trying to figure out where did this go wrong? And I remember I traveled to the university he taught at in his third career. And I was talking to one of his colleagues. He goes, one of the things I loved about your dad, he took a genuine liking to everybody. He was so inclusive. And he said, he knew the janitor's name, first name, last name, kids' names, wife's name. And he goes, your dad didn't just give the courtesy hello, good night to the janitor. He would stop in the hallway and talk to him for several minutes about his family and remembered everything that he would say, and then got a follow-up conversation next time. And that's the kind of guy my dad was.
Excellent. Wow. And you, of course, did not get an opportunity to come out to him as being gay.
I did not. Yeah, I asked my mom, I said, what do you think? Again, my dad was very inclusive, but yet from a generation where being gay was probably not totally acceptable. Someone that would be 92 today, you think back to their life, just was a different time, different place. And she said, your dad would have been fine with it. He wouldn't have been angry, although he probably would have called your boyfriend your roommate or your friend. You would have been welcome to come over, but he probably wouldn't have acknowledged it with the same semantics, but he would have been okay.
Now, Andy, what about your brothers and sisters? I think you have 2 sisters and a brother. I've
got a brother and a sister. I'm the youngest. My sister is 15 years older than me. So she was more like a second mom, because I don't have any memory of living with her. So by the time I was, 4 years old, she was already out of the house in nursing school. My brother, 10 years older than me, he passed away about 10 years ago. So it's just me and my sister now. Both my parents are deceased as well. And we have a very close relationship, and I'm very close to her kids as well.
Oh, excellent. So they were accepting of that part of it.
Yeah, her whole family, there was no issues at all. I was one of the lucky ones, Dan, because think about Nebraska in the early 90s and the 80s coming out as gay. It could be detrimental to your physical health, detrimental to your career,
your mental,
your livelihood. You just don't know. Are you going to get gay bashed? Are you going to get called the F word out on the street. That happened a couple of times to me, by the way, exiting a gay bar, and got spit on once. That was quite unusual. But gay bashing was quite common back then. And matter of fact, the gay bar in Omaha at the time, called the Max, it's still open today, wouldn't let you leave alone. We had a buddy system because there were too many gay bashing events, and there was actually a murder that took place from a gay guy leaving a bar too. I don't think it was the Max, but a gay guy leaving a bar. So they had a buddy system, and you go to the door, and if you're leaving alone, they say you got to wait till someone else is leaving too. You need to walk to the cars together. That's how bad it was at the time. I mean, it's not like that anymore, but at the time it was.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's sad, isn't it? Sad that we had that situation happen. That is, it again shows the inhumanness of people.
That's right.
That they sometimes think they have a right to take someone's life because of that. Yeah. That is inhuman, and that's criminal. And I'm sorry.
Matthew Shepard was about that same time.
Like you said, things have changed. They've gotten better.
Yeah, absolutely. Matthew Shepard.
Can happen today. It still can happen today.
It still does happen today, especially in other countries, but it still happens in the U.S. too. But Matthew Shepard was about that same time. One state over in Wyoming was right about that same year in the early 90s. But for me, what I learned about people that gay bash and gave you a hard time, it's their own insecurities. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. That's their own fault. It's their own insecurity that comes out. And that's the only way they know how to handle their own insecurities. And many of them, by the way, not all, but many of them are gay themselves, or maybe have a gay tendency. And they're so angry that they can't be themselves. That's how I always viewed it.
I agree with that. I think that's very well put. Very well put. Well, let's talk a little bit about Sage, your husband. Mm-hmm. And he actually graduated from your university. Tell us how that happened and what he does today as far as his living.
I met Sage, it's 16 years ago now. We've been together 16 years, married for 7. And he had been a lifetime flight attendant for America West, headquartered in Phoenix. America West acquired US Air, and then US Air acquired American. Then they moved their headquarters to Dallas from Phoenix. But Sage had been a lifelong flight attendant, loves to fly, loved it. But I think he was looking for a career that just had more of a passion attachment. And this guy was born to be a therapist. He really was. So we have free tuition for spouses at Alliant. And he said, do I qualify for free tuition? I said, yeah. He goes, well, he did his bachelor's degree at Arizona State. He said, I want to get my master's in counseling or therapy. So he chose our licensure program, master's degree, marriage, family therapy, got his state license in Arizona after he graduated, and opened up his own clinic site under supervision here in Phoenix. And he's just so good at that. Now, I could never be a therapist. My sessions would be very short. I'd say, get over it.
Let's fix it, Andy. Kidding. You and I are the same. Let's fix it. Now get on with the program.
Exactly. My therapy sessions.
We were talking about, Andy and I were both, we're fixers. We're fixers.
Yeah, exactly.
Even when they don't want to be fixed, we're
fixers.
Right.
That's right. No, that's the thing. See, I'd be a horrible therapist because I just want to get right to the meat. Let's fix this now. Let's make a bullet point list, and we're going to fix this in this hour. Where therapy is more about listening and coping. He's really good at that. So he is a marriage family therapist in Arizona. I'm very proud of him. His clients just adore him. He specializes mostly in couples therapy. Now, I want you to think about this, Dan. I am married to a marriage family therapist. Do you understand what I'm saying here?
I certainly do.
In other words, I'm always in therapy, basically. I just want you to think about that for a moment.
Well, I think it's interesting that he came and got his degree because the tuition was free, and you went into higher education because it was free tuition.
Right. You see a theme here?
You and Sage need to know how to. You guys seem to know how to do freebies well.
We do. Yeah, we just latch on to those.
Yeah. Well, I'm so proud of what he's done too, and I can see you're proud of him as well too.
I am.
And I want to talk a little more about the university today, and I think it's so significant that you guys are the number one university in the United States for being able to help clinical psychologists, and something is so needed today. So you're working in something that is a gift, and the gift that you can give to others. What would you say to individuals out there that may be gay or hiding they're gay, or they are struggling with some fear in their life? Maybe they want to come out. Maybe they're bisexual. Maybe they could be heterosexual and have fear. And obviously, the university trains people to do that. But in your own personal story, Andy, is there anything you would like to share with individuals who are struggling with who they are right now? What would you say to them?
Firstly, you've probably heard of the 18-40-60 rule. And that is, as an 18-year-old, you care about what everybody thinks about you. At 40 years old, you stop caring what everybody thinks about you. At 60, you understand for the first time in your life that nobody was thinking about you. And I kid a little bit. I mean, that's kind of funny, but maybe
but
kind
it's
of
actually true. It's
yeah.
actually true.
And in other words, people have their own lives. They have their own distress. They have their own issues. They might think about you for a few seconds and they're moving on. So when people are, I can't come out. What are going to people think about me? And well, it's none of your business what people think about you first.
Mm-hmm.
But second, you got to be transparent. You got to be you. Here's what happens when someone holds a secret. Human beings are born with intuition. We all have it. And there's different levels of awareness with intuition, but everybody has a basic amount of it. And when someone holds back, especially in their personal lives, people sense it, and you come across as not genuine or authentic. And you come across, no one can really pinpoint like, that Dan, there's something about him. I just don't, if you really are not truly being you and your authentic self, and that could be gay, bisexual, could be fluid, whatever, could be trans, whatever. Just be you. Because one, most people really don't give it a lot of thought, as much thought as you might think they do. Two, right. It's not going to, it's at least in today's times in most places, it's not going to drastically alter your trajectory. But number three, and I think most importantly, is if you're living a transparent, authentic life, people really bond to that. They like people who are themselves, genuinely themselves, and can be whatever it is they need to be comfortable. Because if you're not, there's something off that the people sense and they can't quite pinpoint it. Hey, do you think Dan is gay? Oh, I don't know, but he never talks about this or he never does that. But, just be yourself and you'll be surprised how that has an attraction component. And by attraction, I don't just mean romantic partners. I mean business, and I mean friendships and relationships. It is pretty powerful when you are truly your authentic self, what happens in your life and the kind of people you attract.
Wow. What a wonderful comment. And I really support that. And I think that's even when you get to the physical part of holding in who you are and being secret who you are, you're going to suffer physically. There's going to be a physical, when you're restraining that within you, it is so strong, so powerful, and so damaging until you're able to be your authentic self. And, for me, Andy, and I think one thing that I've shared with my podcasters, I went through, as my book said, my whole life unraveled for a period of time. But I had a sense of peace. I had a sense of peace and acceptance. And the peace for me was coming to grips with who I was. And I made this comment before. Nobody in this universe defines who I am. I define who I am. Organized religion does not define who I am. My friends don't define who I am. I define who I am. Now, my partner completes who I am.
Yep.
There's a difference between defining who I am and completing who I am. Yes. And I think that when I have a sense of peace and I have a sense of happiness that I'm a beautiful gay man. And I love who I am. And I think that sense of peace and I think that sense of acceptance not only emotionally gives you the emotional life you want, but I also think it gives you physically a longer life because you're not holding that stuff in. And that's such a great comment you made, Andy, and I really appreciate that. Let me ask you a question. If someone wanted to apply to Alliant University and be able to become a psychologist, is there a website they can go to find out more about it? And if someone wants to get involved in the nursing program, is there a website they can go about and they can learn more about it? Would you like to give that to us?
Sure. It's alliant.edu. So it's ALLIANT.edu. And all of our programs are on there. Again, we specialize laser focused in professional practice programs, most of which lead to licensure and mostly at the graduate level. So our mental health licensure programs, our master's degree or doctoral programs, PsyD, PhD, Master of Arts, and Master of Science. And then on the nursing side, we do have a pre-licensure program at the bachelor's level. It's really our only bachelor's program right now. And then we have a direct entry master. So if you have a bachelor's degree in anything, even business, and you want to switch careers to nursing, your direct entry, any bachelor's degree comes in with some prerequisite courses or gen eds that you have to take before you get in. And you're in. It's a 2-year program. With any bachelor's, you become a nurse. We are a really specialized university. A lot of our students are career changers, even midlife career changers, people that say, hey, I'm tired of doing X. Now I do want to do Y. And that is a good part of our student body. Clinical psychology is doctoral. All the other programs are masters or in the nursing situation, a bachelor's program. We have plenty of other programs too, but alliant.edu is that address.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andy. I want to really compliment you. You've had a lot of courage that you've shown in your life. And I just want to thank you for being my guest today. It's a great university. I'm going to give a little bit of information on my website of how to get a hold of the university as well. Andy, it's been my pleasure. We look forward to seeing you. I'm still in California because the weather's cool here. Mm-hmm. I will be back to spend the winters in Arizona and be able to spend some time with you and Sage. And thank you so much for being on my podcast today.
Dan, the pleasure is mine. Love what you're doing. Love the book. Love your podcast. Love you. Thank you, Dan, for being who you are.
Oh, thank you, Andy. I appreciate that so much. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
You too.